Well, good evening, everyone, or afternoon, wherever it is for you. Like Scott said, my name is Karen. I am a mental health therapist specialist, supervisor, certified sex addiction therapist, supervisor. I work with trauma and clients. I work with couples, partners, spouses, addicts, you name it. That's what I work with. Also, I've spent many, many years working with alcohol and drug addiction, whether that's in the family system or that's the clients that I work with. So a topic that comes up all the time and a word that I'm sure everyone hears and people always go, what does that mean and how do I do it, is that word called boundaries. What I see many times with clients is, especially in coupleships or families, is it's so difficult for everyone to communicate with one another. If there's an addict that's active, obviously it's really difficult and probably not going to work to be talking to them when they're high. They're not, most of the time, they're not going to hear what you're saying or remember what you're saying in a lot of cases. So that means that boundaries many times have to be set. And again, that goes for the addict as well. You may have to set boundaries with your family, your partner, your spouse, whatever that is. The areas that we talk about most and teach about are boundaries around physical boundaries, mental boundaries, emotional boundaries, sexual boundaries. And I'm just going to go over a little bit about what each one could look like depending on who you are. So as a regular human being, which we all are, it's okay for me to set a physical boundary with somebody. That means if Scott's talking to me and we're standing there and he's all up in my face talking, it's really okay to say, could you step back, take a step back? Maybe he reminds me of somebody, or maybe his voice is louder. Maybe I have gone through a trauma or I'm going through one and I need to have some space and distance. It doesn't mean you're being impolite. It means you're just setting a boundary and asking somebody to please step back. You can also take a step back as well. We practice that while we're training and while we're working with clients and families on how to do that, because it seems people seem that I don't want to hurt somebody's feelings or I don't want to do that. No, you have to do what you have to do to take care of yourself. And that's important. Emotional boundaries. It's if somebody is yelling and screaming, if they're calling you names, if they're cursing you out in any way, it's okay to set that boundary and say, no, I'm not going to stand here and listen to it. Sometimes we call it take a time out, walk away, set a different time you're going to talk. But it is your right. You deserve to have respect from anybody that you're dealing with, and to have somebody yelling and screaming or calling you something is not okay. We try to treat one another with being human beings and not objects of abuse or anything like that. And that's where I see it come up many times is, I don't like the way you look, or you're this or you're that. If I'm the addict that's saying it, a lot of times that may be my way of creating an argument so that I can walk away and go use. I'm not saying everyone does that, but it occurs whether it's sex addiction or whether it's alcohol or drugs, regardless of what it is. It's very common to see that. So I encourage you, if you don't know how, speaking with a therapist or a counselor or someone that you respect on how they set boundaries, so that you can practice it and it doesn't feel as awkward to ask somebody to take a time out, or you're not going to listen to something and you're not going to take any abuse. Sexual boundaries. Many people have problems with that. They don't want to offend their partner or spouse or whoever they're with and set a sexual boundary. That may mean what I choose to do and what I like to do is not the same thing as the other person. So it's all right to say no. It's okay to say, let's talk about this. Let me explain to you what I think you're saying and have a conversation. Now that leads into the really big word, the conversation word. I find many times more than not that most people do not talk to one another about the sexual interaction between one another. It's almost like it's taboo to say anything and ask any questions or to communicate how you feel. And I mean how you feel sexually or how you feel mentally, or if something is not the way that you prefer, or you're hurt in some way, things like that. It's very, very awkward. And we're not trained to be able to do that. So I encourage you to have conversation with one another. And that means, like, I respect Scott. So I'm not going to interrupt him. I'm going to let him speak. And then I speak. He listens, I speak, I listen, he speaks. That way we're hearing one another, we're communicating, we're not thinking about the next answer that we want to come back with, but we're focused on what's occurring in that moment. And again, I guess the best advice I can throw out there to anybody, which is I'm not supposed to throw advice out, but let your body know. Your body tells you what to do. It sends out warning signals many times about this is not comfortable, this is not an okay situation, and I need to be safe. Or it's not the right time to have that conversation. So you set a time frame when it will be, where both people can be present mentally and physically to be able to have a conversation. So anything you want to add to that, Scott? Does that ring a bell with you in any way? It did to me.
Yeah, boundaries are a tricky topic for a lot of people, primarily because whether we're addicts or partners of addicts, I think we feel like we don't deserve to have healthy boundaries. Addicts in particular tended to grow up without good boundaries, and we don't know what good boundaries are. We don't know how to set them. We don't know how to enforce them. We don't know how to respect them. I'm not the partner of an addict, but I would assume that might be true there as well.
Right.
And what we end up with is a dysfunctional relationship where we're afraid to say what we need and like and don't like, and because we're afraid of being rejected and abandoned, and and of getting into an argument. I mean, you mentioned sometimes an addict will use a boundary to start an argument, so he's not used. But
right.
we'll also avoid discussing the boundary or setting a boundary because we don't want to get into an argument. And then we'll get a resentment about it, and then we'll go drink and use and act out. So
yeah, I agree, and I think I see more than anything else as we grow up, and it's not anyone's fault. People have to be taught what boundaries are. A lot of times, when you're raising children, you say no, you set a boundary for what they can do. But many families do not feel comfortable enough to be able, or strong enough to be able to set a boundary with their family, even as an adolescent, an adult, whatever, to be able to say, this is what I need, and I need to set a boundary, and we're not going to talk about this. Like, my life is my life, my sexual life is my sexual life, so thank you, Mom, very much, but I really need to set a boundary on this. Or you're not living in the world that I live in, so you only know part of the story. And that can be very uncomfortable, especially if your family of origin were never trained or taught or even knew how to set a boundary. Then you become odd man out with, what do you mean by boundary? This is just how it is. And so that's why I encourage you very much. There's a lot of good articles out there. You'll hear a lot of people speaking the word boundary, but to act it, to do it, to think through it, and to get help for it is what's really important to do, so that you are heard, you are important, you deserve respect, as Scott said. And the hardest part is some people worry about hurting his feelings. It's not. It's only hurting you if you allow things to continue on and you feel like you don't have a voice, to start creating a voice for yourself. With support if you need that.
I think a lot of boundaries fall short of the goal because we hear no, but we don't hear why.
Yeah, good.
I need you to step back because when you're standing too close to me and talking, it makes me physically uncomfortable, and then I struggle to hear you. If you step back, I'll be able to hear you better, and we can interact in the way that you want to interact. That's a big difference than saying, dude, step back. You're in my space, So, and I think parents with kids, a lot of times they just say, no, don't do that. And there's never an explanation. It just sets the tone for kind of unhealthy boundaries.
And that can be a parent to an adult child, or an adult child to a parent. I mean, it goes both ways. That I may need as a child to set a boundary with my family, but I've always been told to speak when spoken to, or not given the space to say what I think or feel. And I'm not asking you to put yourself in an uncomfortable situation, just to consider that you probably live in situations or have lived in situations where you needed to be able to say, not right now. I need to talk about this later. I need to be able to focus on this. If I'm at work and I get a phone call, I don't want to argue with somebody that's at home while I'm working. I need to be able to set a boundary and say, we'll have to talk about it when I get home, or we'll have to delay that till later. And that's totally respectable to one another to be able to do that, but difficult. And it's very difficult when you're angry, upset, and hurt, or you've had trauma from your partner or spouse, is to be able to have a voice. Because a lot of times there's fear of repercussions. I hear that all the time in couples counseling. Well, if I really say how I feel, or if I set a boundary on this, then there'll be repercussions. And I don't know what I'll hear later, or if they'll talk to me again, or what will happen. And usually we sit there and work through it together so that people they actually practice it. And I'm hoping there can be more of that, because it is such an awkward type of thing to do if you were never given that permission.
And
so does it?
One of the rules about boundary setting, particularly in a partner situation, particularly in a relationship that's damaged by infidelity or something, is when you set a boundary, part of that may be, if you violate this boundary, the consequences will be this. So if you cheat on me again, I will leave the relationship. But we always counsel people, don't set a consequence that you're not willing to follow through on, because you lose all credibility, and your boundaries, that person is just going to say, okay, I can trample every boundary now. So we always encourage people, before you say, if you do this, I will walk out or divorce you or whatever, make sure that's really what you're going to do. You set that consequence on a violated boundary.
Scott, sometimes what I suggest to people that have a hard time really speaking up for themselves, I mean, they may speak up when they're angry, or they may speak up through tears and showing that they're sad, is to write down the boundaries. Write down so that it's clear. And even if you have to read from a piece of paper to set a boundary, that's all right too. Make sure that you're clear in what you're saying. And then you're looking for the other person to agree and say, I can honor that boundary, or to tell you, no, I can't do that. And that way you know where you stand with it. You can have a discussion. Maybe there's a negotiation that comes with it. Like, you can't be here at the house if you're cheating on me. If you do treatment, or if you are going to meetings or things like that, then we'll work together to see what can change and how we can change the living arrangements. Maybe somebody lives in a different bedroom than the other person. So there's room for negotiation when boundaries are set, but make sure that they're clear and that the other person acknowledges whether they can agree to that boundary or not. It's also okay to say, I don't have an answer right now. I want to talk to my therapist or to my sponsor, and I need to get back with you on that. That's okay answer too, because we train everyone that's in recovery is to have a sponsor or a therapist to be working with, so you can work through any issues that come up. But also to be able to set a time when you will get back. Don't just put it out into the future and say, we'll talk about it later. No, it'll be forgotten or lost. So it's okay, and it doesn't look like you don't know what you're doing. By writing it down and being very clear, you can have somebody help look over the boundaries with you to make sure that they sound clear. Because when we're emotional and we're writing those things, a lot of times we leave out what we really want to say. And so I encourage you to do that as well. That's very helpful.
Yeah, I would agree. Just to let everybody know, this is a Q&A, we presented. So you can ask questions, use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. If you have questions about boundaries or any other aspect of addiction and recovery, feel free to ask, and Karen will be happy to answer. Karen, you mentioned pay attention to your body. because a lot of people really and truly don't know where boundaries should be and don't know the boundary that should be there, but probably isn't, gets crossed or trampled or whatever. But our bodies do know. What should people be paying attention to?
Yeah.
If the boundary's been crossed.
Your body, we call it somatic. Your body many times yelling at you inside, like step away, stop this. Maybe you've had trauma and it reminds you of something. You have a thought, but then your body feels it. You can pay attention to what your body is telling you. It's not all about our brain. It's about our brain. It's about our heart. It's about our body. And you have to listen to those things. If I'm around someone that, for whatever reason, they remind me of something in the past, and so automatically my body goes into alert mode, I pay attention. Am I safe? Is there a door around me that I could leave if I need to? It's an automatic alarm system for you to say, be aware, because my brain may go into a mode of almost like a freeze. I may flash back to something. My mind may be wandering. I don't know what to do or say, but your body will yell at you and scream at you and give you a hint, pay attention to me, because your gut is going off with the alarm system to protect yourself. Much like you hear the alarms from the tornadoes going off, that you automatically know, pay attention, be safe. So you pay attention to what your body's saying. It's telling you to listen and be safe, and it will help guide you to what you need to do. So that's very common to feel that when you're in a certain area, or you're around certain people, or in a situation with somebody that you can tell they're escalating. And when someone becomes anxious or they're escalating, their voice is louder, then the alarms go off, like safety, safety. I don't want to get hit. I don't want to get hurt. I don't want to get hurt inside. So it may be just my body saying to me, this isn't safe, and it means I need to talk down, I need to lower, de-escalate the room, de-escalate whatever's going on, because I don't feel comfortable inside. So our body's more than just what carries us around. It's also our alarm system as well, as your brain is and as your memories are. So that's a great point.
I think everybody's somatic alarm system is a little bit different too. You kind of have to learn what yours is. I mean, I carry mine right here in the chest and the upper abdomen. If something's off, that's where I feel anxiety and fear and all of that stuff. If I'm in a restaurant and I'm sitting with my back to the room, my alarm goes off. I'll ask the person across, can you switch seats?
Exactly.
Why? And usually like, yeah, sure, it's fine. Because they get it.
And that takes courage to do, Scott. I mean, I admire you for that. That takes a lot of courage to be able to say, I too sit with my back to something, just because of things in my lifetime. But I have to honor that and respect. That's just part of me. But to have the courage enough, like you're saying, to be able to say that to somebody is, I just feel more comfortable on the other side, or do this. You're taking care of yourself. And most people that know you would know that's an okay thing to do.
Yeah.
But good point.
With people with really good recovery, that they get it.
Yeah.
I've heard it said. By the way, everybody, ask questions about, again, boundaries or any topic related to addiction and recovery. Karen and I can talk about that. And we will. I've heard boundaries described as knowing where I end and you begin. Can you talk a little bit about that?
What I say in a relationship is we never want to be smothered in a relationship. If we're smothered, then I can't breathe, I can't survive. A healthy relationship, I'm going to use a term that I hope no one gets offended by, but I'll use a term, I look at it as like the MasterCard symbol. It's the two circles that overlap. And that space that overlaps in between sort of looks like this. It can get bigger, it can get smaller. That's the space you both share with one another. That may be where all the secrets are. That may be where you talk about love, you talk about your life, your feelings, your whatever. But there has to be space outside of that for yourself, for you alone, for yourself, to have your own thoughts, your own feelings. When this circle becomes smaller in here, as the MasterCard symbol becomes smaller, that means that our relationship is squishing down. There's something wrong with it. And it's a good time to talk about it because it may be something that's real easy to just talk about and resolve. Somebody got their feelings hurt. Somebody needs an amends. If you're in recovery, you know what amends means. It's not about the other person. It's about you making the amends to another person for something you did or said or didn't do or lied about or whatever it is. So that's why I think in a healthy relationship, whoever that's with, you have space to be able to, in that relationship, to be connected. And then you have your own space for you to grow, learn, and to do the things that you want to do with it. And that's what you have to watch out for, is that nobody is closing and shutting you down so that you're not allowed to have a voice. You're not allowed to think. You're not allowed to say anything, to have an opinion, to have friends. You know, you're starting to have that relationship shut you off from the world outside of you. And I see that many different times as well. And a lot of times just that, again, that conversation, that setting boundaries can change the whole thing around, because the other person may not realize that's what they're doing unless you speak up. Does that help some?
Yeah, and I think the amount of overlap there between the two circles is going to vary depending on the relationship. You know, some people
exactly
may be happier with, you know, almost, you know, concentric circles on top of each other, whatever the problem. I'm a writer. I should know what concentric means, but I don't.
Exactly.
And you know, other relationships may have much less overlap, and depending on the state of the relationship at any given time, does that vary about what people are comfortable with?
Yes, and it does, very much so. If I as a human feel closed in and I can't talk and it gets closer and closer together, then my alarms are going to go off more, because I'm probably more sensitive to what my body's saying and what I'm feeling like in that relationship. And as I'm more comfortable in it, that cylinder in between where the circles overlap can become much larger. It can change day by day, depending upon what goes on. And it can change day by day depending upon how vulnerable you feel that day, or you feel like you can let yourself be. I may share something that's very important to me, and just to be able to say that to my partner or spouse makes that whole circle become bigger. It gives me more room. I can breathe. I can feel something. And to know that I was heard is very important as well. So that's usually just a symbol I use to show how to make sure that the boundaries can be flexible and boundaries can be firm. And that's why when you were talking, when you're ready to set a boundary, be ready to back it up too.
So the overlap, what do you, in your experience, see happening to the overlap when, let's say you and I are married and you just found out I'm a sex addict and I've been cheating on you for the last 3 years? Many times
the circles just barely touch at that point in time. They don't overlap. If you cheat on me, and my reaction is, I just found out, I'm going to usually go inside. I'm going to check things out and go, what did I do wrong? That usually is the first thing that comes up in someone's mind. Then the anger can start. I've been lied to. I've been cheated on. How do I trust this sacred space that we used to have with one another if you're cheating with somebody else? Are you sharing your emotions and your feelings with this other person and not with me anymore? And so it almost becomes two separate circles just barely touching one another. And with healing, with both people doing the work they need to help themselves, one may be the addict, one may be the partner or spouse, to really understand, because it's not their fault. An addict owns their stuff. They are responsible for their behaviors and actions. But for a while, they're just going to touch one another. And that's it, until they feel safer, they've done some work together, and then they can start to overlap again, usually slowly, because I don't want to get hurt again. I don't want to have trusted you for 20 years and thought you were the person that I knew, and all of a sudden found out I didn't know. All these other things were going on. So I'm going to protect myself. My alarms go off. Protect me, protect me, protect me. And anger can get in the middle and stop you from saying something. That's why we always talk about seek a support group, seek a therapist, seek out somebody. We've got all kinds of webinars and different things where people can talk. Seek out some outlet so that you can start talking and understanding you're not alone, and understanding that the addict themselves, they don't have to be alone. If they don't choose to be, they can be in a healthy environment too, and then come back together in a slow way, hopefully with help, so that you're working on the healing process as it goes on. I see a lot of that in the couples therapy side, where people don't necessarily come into therapy because things blew up. It's because they want to come back together, and they're working on how can they make that happen. And one obviously means the addict needs to stop acting out, or stop using, or doing what they need to do to get the help so that they can do that. And then I have to rebuild trust again. Doesn't mean I don't love you. It just means I can't trust you at that point.
Yeah, I think, again, the circle analogy is really working for me, where they're just touching because there's no safety, there's no trust.
Right.
And one of the things I always tell my sponsees about boundaries is boundaries are not about keeping other people out.
Right.
They're about letting them safely in. And when there's no safety, those circles, it's very uncomfortable if they overlap at all, let alone a lot or as much as they used to. So
right. And I think that adds, when you know that you've started to become distant because you found out something, then there's a lot more fear of, well, will it ever work again? I get that question all the time. Will I ever be able to change if I'm the addict? Or if I'm the partner or spouse, will they ever change? Will we ever be able to trust one another again? And the answer is, if people are doing the work they need to do, anybody can change their life. But they have to work on it, and they have to be aware of it, and you have to have help with it. Help may be your 12-step group, or it may be your church group, or whatever it is, but you can't do it alone, because alone is what pushed us away, thinking we could have everything we wanted in the world. And it may be to somebody a higher power, or whatever you choose to call anything else beyond that, but not alone, not for either person involved at all.
We've got a question here. It says, my husband is a porn addict who has stopped watching porn because I put up boundaries for my mental health. He would reject me, but then turn around and watch a lot of porn. He has been resentful ever since. He's in denial about his addiction and tries to get me to drop my boundaries by telling me I have put restrictions on him. He tells me he wants to compromise to get me to drop boundaries by saying he won't go to porn sites, but I should be okay with him seeking out sexy pictures or going to websites that have a lot of porn. When I tell him I won't drop my boundaries, and we call it not porn sometimes, in the Victoria's Secret catalog, it's not porn. It's porn.
It's not porn.
When I tell him I won't drop my boundaries, and if he wants to break my boundaries, he can, but he knows the consequences. He told me because he can't look at porn, I've taken his joy, and now he has no joy in his life. Karen, thoughts?
So what I'm hearing is there's a partner that looks at porn. A boundary's been set that says no porn, which is totally an okay boundary to set in a relationship. And it sounds as if the addict side, the person that looks at porn, who's not willing to give that up, is trying to get the other person to change the boundaries, modify them. Just let me look at it a little bit. Just let me look at it one day a week. Well, that's like a drug addict saying, okay, I'll only use on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, but I won't use on Sunday. That's still what I would put in the category of manipulation. And you have a right to set a boundary and say, no, I'm not comfortable with that. And that's not the kind of relationship that I want to be in. And that person should probably seek help from someone to know what is drawing them back to porn or to whatever that they're looking at, whatever they call it. What is pushing them back to seek that out again over paying attention to our relationship and our coupleship? Did that answer that question?
Yeah, I think so. I happen to know a little bit about this situation. This is irregular. The addict has some narcissistic tendencies, to be polite. How does that play into this?
Oh, usually with the narcissistic side, it's underneath that many times is, I deserve this. This is what I want. We'll say, you'll usually hear the words I, me. And a relationship is about us. So I need this. I want this. I deserve it. Look at all the things that I'm doing that's okay, and I deserve this. If it's two consenting adults and agree to something, that's up to them. If one of the two adults in the relationship says, no, I'm not okay with this, then the relationship's out of whack, because they're not consenting for whatever is going on. And until a boundary is set and held, then the person may decide to go, well, I'll just go someplace else and look at porn. Or I'm not going to stop doing it. I mean, it may come down to that. But it's the boundary has to be set and be clear and be maintained. And everybody has to agree in anything, because that's a sexual process. Looking at porn is a sexual process. You're usually not looking at, animals running around the woods. You're looking at people in naked bodies or partially naked clothed bodies and things like that. And in a couple's relationship, one partner may want to know, well, why do you have to look at them? What we call or train or teach on a lot of times is it's objectification of another person. Not treating them like they're human, but it's objectifying them. And then that can lead to all other type of fantasies and stuff in someone's head. So it's working on being in your integrity, but treating all humans as human beings and not objectification.
Yeah, that's why I think that not porn is still porn for a sex addict or a porn addict.
Right.
It's serving the same purpose. Just because she still has her top on doesn't mean
yeah. Right.
Yeah. Can you talk? Oh, go ahead.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to ask if you would talk a little bit about, because there's clearly a conflict here, about healthy conflict resolution and setting some boundaries around being able to resolve conflicts, and in particular, viewing yourselves as on the same team with the same goal, which would be a healthy relationship, as opposed to being on different teams where one person's goal is no porn and the other person's goal is porn. Can you talk a little about that and how to go about that?
There's a lot of practicing techniques that go on where it has to be clear for the person. Say you're the user of porn, we're in a relationship, and I say, it upsets me that you go away, or you're looking at your phone, or you're on the computer and you're locked up and I'm not with you, because I don't get to see you. I don't get to communicate. We don't get to have conversations or do anything anymore. The other person's going, well, this is what I enjoy doing, and I deserve my time. I work hard, and this helps relax me. Well, where am I in this? How can I help? Maybe if we sit down and listen to music, or we talk to one another, coming up with suggestions that clearly states this person, it'll show the difference between a person who's just a porn addict, bottom line, or the person really is looking for a way of relaxing and getting away from things that may be through their business or whatever situation that they're dealing with. I always ask people to ask permission to have a conversation. Don't yell it out and scream it out and say, there's something I really need to share with you or talk to you about. What time can we do this? When can we do this today? And not as they're walking out the door or something. And express how you feel about it. Like, I want you in my world together. I want to be with you. But I can't have porn be between us because it interferes with our lives together. It may interfere sexually with how we interact with one another, and it takes you away from me. And it's, you want to be alone and you're locking me out from being there. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But you have to be honest and say it, and really put out there what you need. It's not about, a relationship is about trust, and it's about honesty. And if you don't have trust and honesty in a relationship, chances are that relationship is not going to last or not going to be good. Both people are not going to be happy in that. So if I express my disappointment, or I'm going to say disappointment because a lot of times people will feel disappointed that somebody's looking at porn, whatever that means, is looking at porn, well, and they turn it on themselves. What, am I not good enough for you? And that's not really how the addict is feeling. They're doing it because they're finding pleasure and escape in doing that. But you have to talk to them and find out. Yeah.
And these conversations probably not good first thing in the morning or right before one of you leaves to work.
Right.
Not good within an hour or two of when you're going to bed, because then you're going to get angry. Not good in front of the kids, not good in public. It's okay to set a time. Look, at 6:30 p.m. we'll sit down, and it's okay to put a time limit on those conversations. I mean,
exactly.
Conversations can be rough. You can say, we'll discuss it for 10 minutes, and then if we want to continue for 10 more, we can. And if we need to take a break, we'll pick it up tomorrow.
And I think, you're saying everything exactly right. That's the way it is. I think the problem is it seems so awkward for people because most of us were not raised that way. You weren't raised to say, can we talk about it, at this time? Or the person that's really upset, I don't want you to leave and go to work right now. I've got something to say. And usually that's more of a telling scenario than a listening scenario. Because the other person has their mind on, I'm going to work right now, or I don't want to be upset going into work. Gosh knows if that person was a doctor, I sure wouldn't want them operating on me at that moment. But at the same time, that's communication in itself, and setting a time frame where you can talk. But it's not what we grew up being told to do. A lot of people would have things at the dinner table. Well, I don't even know if they're dinner tables anymore. But a lot of people would have family conversations there. A coupleship and a relationship is not about the family. It's about the two people first, not in front of the children. And children can be all ages. Believe me, they know a lot of things that are going on. They can feel the tension in the house. They can hear things that if somebody is what I call busted on something, there's times that the children will say, yeah, they knew. They didn't know everything, but they knew there was something wrong because of their parents and their interactions. And they don't want them to split up or separate, so they just keep it quiet.
Should parents, this is off of our topic, but should parents, if there's infidelity, sex addiction going on, and the parents are actively working on it, should they tell the kids what's up? Because especially young kids who might blame themselves for tension in the home?
That question comes up a lot. And a lot of times I'll see it couples will ask the question, like, what do we tell our children? Well, first of all, the sexual aspect of anything that's going on, I don't say, well, talk to your 7 and 8-year-old and tell them that. Many times it's okay to say, Mom and Dad are having some problems right now with one another, and we're working through it. And we have our own place, our own boundaries as a couple as to what we share with the rest of the world. It's not like taking a billboard out and say, guess what, he cheated on me. We have our own connection in between. And I think the age of children are so important. They can feel anxiety, they can feel anger, but they may not understand. And personally, I'm going to say this personally, if I ever sat there and thought about my parents having sex, mean, growing up, that would have been like, oh, gross.
Ew.
And I'm, ooh. And I don't, that's just me personally, and I'm not weird or anything. I just like, we had 6 kids, so obviously they had something that they had going. But at the same time, it's the coupleship comes first, that they have to be working on that. And the children can understand that, mommy or daddy, have to go somewhere for 2 weeks or whatever it is. And a lot of times that's how they explain it. Later on, many people will just give an outline of, we were having trouble being mom and dad together. We were having trouble in a relationship together, but they don't go into any of the sexual details. Many children can get hurt by that because then they become the surrogate spouse. So if my husband leaves me to go be with somebody else, and I'm talking to my 12-year-old son, complaining how horrible I feel and sharing all my feelings and emotions or sexual feelings with that 12-year-old, then that's what we call becoming a surrogate spouse. They're our children. They're not to be our substitute.
Term for that is covert incest. So that tells
yes.
you how damaging it is.
That's how it can be. And it's not their role to be playing the spouse, because we take away a lot of their childhood by doing that. And I think a lot of people don't realize that they are. I mean, I don't know that they intentionally do that. I let's hope that they're not. But it can cause more damage. But you can acknowledge that there's some issues going on and some things like that. But I would not sit down with young children and have any conversations about what your sexual life is like. It's really between the couple.
Yeah, but I do think that a lot of times, because kids will internalize blame for stress and anxiety in the household, I think it's important to sit them down and say, Mommy and Daddy are struggling right now. It has nothing to do with you. We'll
exactly.
work it out. Don't worry about it. We love you. You haven't done anything wrong. This is between us. Don't worry about it.
Exactly.
And that's enough for most kids,
Yeah. And it is. And they know. I mean, especially kids when they're teenagers, they're like, I don't want to know. They're living in this world already that's so sexualized. And that's how so many of them become sexualized early, because they're looking at porn, or their friends are all sharing this and stuff like that. And I really believe that's taking away part of their childhood if we add them into what's going on. But I totally agree. It's okay to sit down and say, acknowledge there is something, but it has nothing to do with you. You've done nothing wrong, because a child may say that to somebody at school, to a teacher, or to somebody. You've done nothing wrong. This is about mom and dad together, and it's not about you, and we love you, and we're going to be with you, and things such as that. To help reassure them that you're going through a hard time, but at the outcome, if it turns out to be okay, and people can heal in a relationship, look what a great lesson the kids have learned, is that there can be conflict and it can be resolved, so that they run into it in their lives. If they do, they have somebody they know they can talk to and say, hey, I have a problem. And they don't have to shut up, be quiet, go away. Not like we were probably raised.
Yeah. Couples can, through healthy conflict resolution, by approaching it with good boundaries around resolving the conflict and recognizing we're on the same team, we're fighting the problem, not each other. Couples can actually, conflict can make a relationship stronger. Is that right?
Sure. Yes, absolutely. To get to the other side, you've got to go through the hell that's there. You have to, in some way or another. I hear many couples tell me that once they've really gone through this and they really start to talk, maybe I had a female partner that told me she had always taken care of everybody, so really had a voice. She would just take care of people. So when they ended up having problems in their marriage, and the spouse was cheating or looking at porn or whatever it was, she didn't even know how to talk and say there's something wrong, because she didn't want to disrupt anything, but she was hurting and melting down inside so bad that finally helping her learn to have a voice and teaching them how to talk, they were able to talk through it. They ended up saying their marriage was better than it had ever been, and they had been married 20 years. because they finally learned how to really talk to one another and be honest with what they feel.
Yeah, I think that's pretty common. We
Yeah.
spend time with couples we work with at the treatment center and elsewhere.
It's beautiful when you see it.
Yeah, I've been kind of itching to ask this one, and this is the addict in me wanting to defend, myself. Boundaries are about protecting me from your behavior, but they're also about protecting you from my behavior.
Exactly.
And I think a lot of addicts, they're like, well, she's setting all these boundaries. I'm going to be male here. She's setting all these boundaries, and who's protecting me? Where are the boundaries to protect me? Well, they are the same boundaries. But I don't know if you have any thoughts about that.
I do. I think a lot of times it seems overwhelming, because if I'm in addict mode, then I get what I want no matter how it is. I'm going to try to get what I want, right? I mean, that's what addicts do. And so to all of a sudden hear that there are boundaries, it's like, well, see, I'm not worth anything. I can't do anything. Well, yeah, you've got a support group to go to. You've got peers that understand what you're going through. And there's also, you have a right to set boundaries too about, like we were talking, communication. It's okay to say, I can't talk right now about this, or I'd like to talk to my sponsor first because I need some support there. And support can look like, I don't know how to answer this question. Should I answer this question yet? When somebody especially is coming back together or moving toward one another from a sexual breakup, or cheating or lying or whatever that is, many times we tell you need to make sure that you're working with your therapist before you disclose everything that's there, so that each person can be in a safe place inside, mentally, emotionally, to hear what they need to hear and to make sure that they're safe afterwards. So the addict a lot of times has difficulty because they're being asked these questions all the time, over and over again, and they're hearing from their therapist, we'll do disclosure together when it's safe, not just give a piece of it out. You may feel better by saying it, but it's not necessarily going to help the other person. So boundaries, you have a right to set your boundaries as well as the addict, and to say, I can't discuss this. We need to be in the therapist's office or whoever you're working with to have that conversation. And you mean that with love and respect. It's about being honest and being in a safe place for both people. Yes, addicts are human too.
Yeah, and with disclosure in particular, just for people who don't know, there's a process of therapeutic disclosure, and it is heavily boundaried, and it involves my therapist and Karen's therapist and our therapist together. She'll send a list of questions from her therapist to my therapist that she wants answers to. And I'll write out this formal disclosure document that'll be several pages long, answering all those questions and putting in anything else that she needs to know. And there are rules about the language that I can use. We don't want to be too graphic. We don't want to, give too many details. And then we'll come together for a session facilitated by the couple's therapist, but her therapist will be there and my therapist will be there, and I'll read this letter or document or whatever. You'll get to ask questions, and then usually there's a break, and then come back together to see if there are more questions and to clarify. And we both have it set up so I have support afterward and she has support afterward. And then we're not done, because she is probably going to write an emotional impact letter based on what I've told her, to tell me, how this affected her and what was most upsetting and how she feels and what she needs to feel safe moving forward. And then we're still not done, because she's going to read that to me and we're going to have the same kind of interaction. And then I'm going to prepare an emotional restitution letter. So, I can apologize and say, I'm so sorry, and this is what I'm going to do moving forward. And, and then I'll probably take a polygraph so she knows I told her everything. And then I mean what I say in my emotional restitution document. And, it's a very long process. And the easiest way to screw it up is for me to just dribble things out piecemeal.
Right. It's horrible.
Because it's death by paper cut. You know, it's just, you are going to bleed to death one drop at a time.
Exactly.
So.
And I agree with you, Scott. Everyone doesn't require a polygraph. Okay. Usually, and just so that everybody that's listening, any addict that's listening out there and going, oh no, I can't do a disclosure, I don't know how to do a polygraph. Well, it's not always required. I see it more when the spouse or the traumatized spouse or partner and their therapist. A lot of times I see it when there's been an affair or cheating or whatever that's occurred before, and did the mea culpa, and I did this, and this, only to find out that the person was lying and didn't tell the truth at all. So it's always in those cases, not always, but you will hear that full disclosure and followed by a polygraph because I believed you the first time. And again, coupleship is based off honesty and truth. So it's becoming more common that I have people do it. And sometimes it helps people get into treatment because they go, I haven't been telling the whole truth. And to do treatment work is whatever it takes to get there. It's fine. I mean, I don't care how it happens. I care that it does happen. But it helps both partners decide where they want to be and what their next step looks like. So disclosure is very definitely a therapeutic process. And I recommend that it's not done in dribbles and drabs. And I know the partner spouse may be digging and searching and looking for phone calls and receipts and all kinds of things. And a lot of times what I'll say is, I understand it, but you have to start sharing how you feel with somebody and not staying up all night digging and looking for something, and you're just going to stay in turmoil. And there's a lot of people out there that are willing to help, and different groups and different programs that are willing to help somebody so they can get through that and get prepared for disclosure. And that's what we always hope for.
Just another thought on the polygraph. There's a lot of times, a lot of the guys I work with as a sponsor, when they're getting ready to give disclosure, we talk about the polygraph, and they end up wanting it because
that's awesome.
They're putting all this effort into telling the truth and to rebuild their relationship. They're serious about it, and they want their wife or partner to know, I really am telling the truth. And they also want the accountability of, I have to get it all out in the disclosure because I'm going to take a polygraph after the disclosure.
Right.
And a lot of them will ask for follow-up polygraphs at the 3-month and 6-month and 9-month and 1-year mark because they want that accountability and they want to rebuild trust with their partner. And
I love the word accountability you threw in there.
They know there's a strength in that polygraph. You can't you can't lie and pass the polygraph. It just doesn't work.
And it's the accountability. Recovery is not easy for anyone, whether it's the addict or the betrayed spouse or partner. It's not easy. It's not an easy process at all for anyone. And to have something in place like that some of the people that that is, they're asking for accountability so that they can have that first year of sobriety and not be tempted to fall backwards into something else and to continue doing that work. That's admirable of them to want that and to want to show their partner spouse really do mean this and they really are working recovery. So that's awesome to hear that.
Yeah, and any extra layer of accountability makes recovery easier, whether it's, net nanny on the phone and computer or going to polygraphs or, showing credit card receipts for every penny spent or any level of accountability. It helps you stay sober as an addict, and it also helps to rebuild trust in your relationship.
Right. I know some couples, when they really want it, and there's a big issue around the phone, always the phone thing is, well, who just texted you? Who just did this? A lot of times they'll just simply come down to the fact of when I walk in, I'm setting my phone down on the table here so that you can see it. And it's not that somebody's over there hawking on the phone looking, but I'm not lying to you and I'm not cheating on you, but I want you to feel comfortable. Here's my phone right here. So that if a message comes through, I'm not hiding anything from you and you can see that. That's huge, and that helps a lot in the relationship of recovery. So that means they want it to. So it's not always required, but it's always interesting when they come up with that as an agreement. Sometimes that's a boundary, and they go, I can do that.
Yeah, a lot of times it's a boundary that that the addict will come to accept and actually appreciate.
Right. Exactly.
So, Karen, we're out of time. So I want to.
I was having fun, Scott.
No, I want to thank you for filling in for David.
I know.
want to thank everybody for being here tonight. Anything you want to say to take us out, Karen?
I just wish all of y'all peace, and I wish that if you're struggling with anything, maybe something we talked about, what we talked about. If you're struggling with anybody, just remember there's always hope. There's always a chance of change, and people can change. If they want to, they can change, and you can change your own life too by getting support and help in any way. And there's a lot of different opportunities out there for it. And if we can help in any way, or you can look online and listen to something and learn and educate yourself around it, please do that. Just to anything to help, but ask for help from at least another person to help you.
Absolutely. Thanks again, Karen. Everybody,
thank you.
We'll be back next week. We'll see you then. Karen's a great fill-in.
Thank you.
So good night, everybody.
Take care. Bye-bye.